Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank Mr. Konstantin Kinsky and let me welcome you to the second part of today's Forum for the Future of Agriculture. Once more, let me remind you that this event is organized under the auspices of the French presidency of the Council of the European Union. The topic of this part of panel discussion is: can we achieve the environmental targets with the new common agriculture policy and national strategic plans? And now is space for your questions, so you can ask to our guests. Let me introduce our guests, our panelists of this part of the panel conference. It will be Mr. Pierre Bascu, Mrs. Monika Nebeská, Mrs. Alžběta Procházková, and Mr. Martin Hlaváček. I hope the connection is okay. So let me invite here Mrs. Monika Nebeská and also Mrs. Alžběta Procházková. Hello. And now, very short, yes, you can please take your seat, for example, here. Yes. And now let me introduce very shortly our panelists. Pierre Bascu, Director, Sustainability Directorate, DG Agriculture and Rural Development, European Commission. Pierre Bascu is the Director for sustainability. Between 2010 and 2014, he was head of the unit responsible for agriculture policy analysis and perspectives. From 2003 until 2009, he was heading the unit in charge of the economics analysis of EU agriculture for the conception, the management, and the evaluation of the common agriculture policy. Have a nice day, Mr. Bascu. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Hello. Monika Nebeská, chairwoman of the board of the Agriculture Cooperative Čestary, manager and executive of number of other companies, member of the board of the regional branch of the Czech Agrarian Chamber in Hradec Králové and the Association of Sugar Growers of Bohemia. Her name is associated primarily with the success of Šestarská cibule, which is registered in the EU Register of Protected Geographical Indications of Origin. Dobrý den, vítejte u nás.
Dobrý den.
Alžběta Procházková, WWF Central and Eastern Europe, which is also strategic partner of the forum. Alžběta Procházková since 2021 has worked for Čmelák, the Czech environmental NGO, and focusing on lobbying for higher green ambitions for eco schemes and the legislation process of the Czech strategic plan of the CAP. In this year, 2022, she joined in WWF Central and Eastern Europe. Welcome. Dobrý den. And Mr. Martin Hlaváček, member of EU Parliament, who is online. Hello, Mr. Hlaváček. Nice to see you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Perfect. And Mr. Hlaváček was head of the Agriculture and Environment Unit, participating in the negotiations of the previous EU Common Agriculture Policy, as well as national items such as protection of local traditional Czech products, for example, famous trademarks of Karlovy Vary, wafers, Czech carp, or Olomouc cart cheese. In 2012, he was Deputy Minister of Agriculture of the Czech Republic, and then he made a personal decision to move into the European Parliament to actively promote the interests of the Czech and European citizens in the area of agriculture, food sector, and rural development. So, Now, let me open the discussion. If you have a question, just log in, put your hand up, and maybe say your name and your position, and also to whom is your question addressed. And please ask just shortly, because for longer opinions or comments, we don't have enough time. But our guests will try to answer all your questions. So, in the audience, has anybody a question? Okay, so little young lady will bring you a microphone. The first question.
Dobrý den, já se jmenuji Petr Marada.
My name is Petra Maradan, and I'm an academic working at the Mendel University, and I'm also a businessman in farming. And I have a question to Mrs. Nebeska. I'd like to ask, because Mr. Mikol and Mr. Potočnik and Mr. Wiesiek in the previous session said, or they told us quite clear arguments and facts and information why we need the Green Deal, why we need biodiversity and organic farming. So how come, and this is a question to Mrs. Nebeska, how come that in the last issue of an expert and sectoral weekly called The Farmer, published in the Czech Republic, the Agrarian Chamber of the Czech Republic states or talks about agricultural hazard, about famine, and they deny our self-sufficiency here in the Czech Republic. And there are sentences like, go and travel to selected agricultural cooperatives because they have already sold out what they will reap in 2022 in their fields. So could you, Mrs. Nebeska, please explain why the Agrarian Chamber provides such information to the Czech public? Okay, Mrs. Nebeska, even though I do not know whether that question directly relates to our debate, but do you want to answer, Mrs. Nebeska? Well, I'm also not certain that this question should go to me. I think that you should rather ask the management of the Agrarian Chamber of the Czech Republic. I am a member of the district agrarian chamber in the city of Hradec Králové. So some info reaches me, but usually with delay. So from my perspective, I think it would be good to introduce what we do so that the auditorium, so that the audience here in the room know what we do. And then you will be able to ask relevant questions because, you know, I work in the field, in the practice. We have 3,000 hectares of land and we own 15 hectares. The rest is rented. So we rent from 985 landowners. So that means that it's on average 2.5 hectares per one landowner. We have livestock production, plant production. We produce onion, broccoli, and we also have livestock for meat and milk production. So we do return organic material back to the soil because that's how it's correctly done, and that's how our predecessors have always done it. We also do our business in a protected zone, historical protected zone of the battlefield of 1866. So we have to comply with the strictest possible limits when it comes to pesticides and pollutants. And that is exactly what we do.
I think if you take the trouble of finding all the interviews that I've provided ever, it'll be very clear that we are using the bio or organic farming methods. We use various techniques that are really on the organic side of things, like having grows. Also, we have an agreement with Mr. Kinski. We are really taking good care of our livestock, of their welfare. I've been in this business for dozens of years, and I believe the methods we've used have paid off. My team and myself have been able to build a very strong company that is really cognizant of all the issues surrounding doing business in agriculture. Yes, if I can chip in, I'd like to ask you, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to chip in and let people ask about these matters later, but I'd like to turn now to Mr. Pierre Basco. And could he say a few words about the strategy of the Common Agricultural Policy and how this can tie into the farmers' interests, also in relation to what Mrs. Nebeska mentioned and the original question that was asked?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Well, I think to answer directly to your question, it is clear that I think the future Common Agricultural Policy aims at supporting and promoting, I think, this transition towards, I think, sustainability, resilience, and competitiveness, I think, for the farm sector, which is very important. And this in a more global strategy covering not only agriculture, but I think the whole, I think, food supply chain. And there, I know in this future CAP, there will be different ways, different abilities for farmers in order to be supported in this endeavor. First, I think, there will be a new system of delivering, public support with, much more flexibility for member states, I think, to basically, tailor, I would say, the policy framework, I think, to the real needs, I think, on the ground and at local level. There will be also, I think, some new policy instruments to support farmers. In the first pillar, I think, with the eco scheme, but also in the second pillar, I think, with the more traditional measures that exist under rural development. But I think one element which will be absolutely fundamental and that we have emphasized, I think, very much for the future CAP, and this is a significant request, I would like to say, I think, from the European Commission to the national authorities in the drafting of a strategic plan, is the contribution of research, of innovation, of training and advisory services. We need to better accompany, I think, farmers in order to ensure, I think, this transition so that farmers improve the environmental and climate performance of their activity, while at the same time, improving, I think, the competitiveness and the viability of a farm operation. And for this, we need to invest massively and use and improve, I think, the use, I think, of the result of research and innovation. We need to really support and encourage farmers, I think, to innovate, to change practices, to adapt, I think, to the latest, I would say, state-of-the-art knowledge in terms of agronomic practices, way of producing, way of marketing, etc. So I think the future CAP is very much, I think, in this line to move towards, of course, I think, and promote, I think, this transition towards, I think, sustainability and resilience and climate neutrality. And Mr. Lucas Dizek talked about, I think, our proposal, I think, to ensure, a climate neutrality for the whole land use sector. So not only agriculture, but also forestry. But in this endeavor, it is absolutely fundamental that the viability and the competitiveness of farming, so I think the profitability of this activity is ensured, and the CAP is aiming at, striking, I think, this balance between, I think, the economic, objective and and I would say, interest, I think, for farmers and the environmental and climate performance. So yes, I think the CAP is very much into this strategic line. Now a lot, I think, will depend, I think, on the member states, I think, through this national strategic plan, and we are now, in an intensive, dialogue, what we call the structural dialogue, I think, with member states, in order to ensure that, in relation to this overall objective, what is being proposed at national level, in order to support, I think, farmers in this journey, I would say, for this transition. I think, but what is proposed is is fit, I think, for this ambition, and will really allow, farmers, I think, to really transform, I think, the way they are farming on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. And I saw Mr. Hlaváček, member of EU Parliament, which is in Strasbourg, and I saw you was shaking your head. What's your opinion?
Yeah, thank you very much. I was shaking in a supportive way, but also in not fully supportive way to some speakers, but that's not the problem. I think the question stands quite clear. And then let's try to have a clear answer. Can we achieve in the next CAP strategic plans period, can we achieve to approach very closely to the targets of climate and biodiversity? And you might be surprised, for a politician, I try to give you a clear answer. We could, but very likely we will not. And why do I believe that? Because first, we are solving a problem that is having a scale. And unless you bring forward a scale solution, because we have 10 million farmers around Europe, and we need to bring to all of them, or at least big majority of them, a solution that they are able to practically implement on the ground. And now member states, and as we have mentioned, some call it flexibility for tailor-made measures at member state level, but some also call it that we are losing the commonality of the CAP, because while we've been doing things on practices that have been tested before, now we allow member states to develop practices, which is a good thing, but we would need some testing period, because we will find out in 2-3 years from now that some of those practices are not simply bringing results. So this would delay. That's reason number one. Reason number two, and this is, I think, on the first point, unless we bring forward practical solutions that 10 million farmers of different level of sophistication can use around Europe, we won't make the scale. Point number two, and this is where I think we are failing in Brussels, all institutions mainly, unless we have a better policy coherence, we won't make it neither. We have heard from Janes at the beginning and from Ladislav, from Lukáš, that we have technologies today available, we have practices available, we have some hope that people would change consumption patterns. I have less hope. I believe we should really use and adopt the state-of-the-art of technology that we have available to now on a massive scale. And that breaks down to those issues they mentioned. It's the issue of our protein deficiency, meaning our dependency on animal nutrition. It is the issue on our fossil dependency, especially when it comes to fertilizers. It is an issue of our energy dependency, and for all of that, indeed, farming could have a workable solutions. The same for alternative sources, but we are not coherent in those policies. If you speak to some Commission services, and not those Pierre Bascu is coming from, but for example, Santé, they are blocking a lot of developments today that is needed for our technological transformation. And if you call to them, they say, sir, we are not here for accelerating Green Deal and farm to fork. We are here to protect food safety, full stop. And this is a clear sign and a show of policy incoherence. So Lukáš can be preaching here what is necessary to do, and I to big extent agree with, but unless we are consistent in our efforts, meaning that all parts of the same organism are making efforts to the same direction, we very likely won't make it. We are preaching about pesticides. We are waiting for ages from DG Santé to have solution for the existing ones, for the alternatives. We are preaching about alternative sources of proteins, about waste, all was mentioned here today, but we are having legislative barriers today to use waste as a nutrition for animals, to use waste as an organic substance to improve soil fertility. So we are making a lot of obstacles to ourselves. I personally believe If we make an effort now, we still have a chance to achieve it. But these are the main reasons where I believe that despite the fact that we could, and the good point is, we have managed to get financial resources for the farming sector. And now it only depends how we will spend those financial resources in the national strategic plans. Either on the business as usual, then we will make it, or we allow acceleration of the trends that are needed to be accelerated.
Okay. Thanks to Mr. Hlaváček for his answer. And maybe I will give the space for Alžběta Procházková, which is from WWF Central and Eastern Europe. Možná i opět v souvislosti a v návaznosti na odpověď.
So, in relation to and elaborating on the answer of MEP Mr. Hlaváček, so will the member states be able to achieve the environmental objectives, or should the environmental objectives rather be adopted based on local specificities? Well, first of all, let me greet everybody on behalf of WWF. We have a new branch opened in the Czech Republic. And since we know that agriculture is becoming very important in nature protection, of course, it will be a priority area for us as well. So that's what I wanted to say as a word of introduction. As for your question, of course, it is absolutely necessary that all environmental objectives are fine-tuned for a specific area, for a specific region. So we have to tailor-make the objectives and prepare let's say, a scale of rules for environmental measures so that they can be applied across the whole of the EU. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Procházková. Do we have any questions?
Okay, I will give you mine. Perfect.
Děkuji. Michal Vokřál, já budu reagovat.
Mr. Michal Vokřál, I will respond to some of the controversies that we've heard so far. Well, first of all, I am happy that we have this conference here in the Czech Republic, because we will soon have the presidency in the Council of the EU. And the Czech agriculture is rather non-standard if I compare it to other EU countries. So maybe that's why we have these controversies. Unlike Mr. Miko, I am a farmer and I am a graduate of this university. So I know a lot about the organic substance in soil and how it gets in the soil. But the most natural way to get it to the land is to add manure to soil. Well, actually, Mr. Miko was a guest in the previous session. Now we have other panelists. Well, I will elaborate on what Mrs. Nebeska said. So if you have sufficient livestock production, you will have sufficient volume of manure and you can add it to the soil. So the EU is recommending, and Miko mentioned it, to stop the consumption of food. And you don't have to tell people, because people will start consuming less because of the price of food. Second of all, reduce the consumption of beef because cows produce methane. That's a nonsense. So do we need the cows to produce manure or to stop them to producing methane? I think we need the manure. Okay, so what's your question? Well, my question is, well, Brussels tell us to reduce the numbers of livestock, of cows in particular, but we need the cows to produce manure to add organic substance to the soil. So a part of land plots, land blocks. I like Tour de France, and we have people from France here. And when I watch through the eye of the helicopter, I see huge fields with corn and other produce. And nobody tells France that the blocks are too large and that they have to make it smaller. And we are dictated to make our land blocks smaller to be 2 to to 20 hectares. And I have one more question relating to CAP. There was an evaluation coming from Brussels and saying that we are not ambitious enough when it comes to reducing pesticides. So how is that possible? Because in Brussels, I mean, how could they look at our pesticide consumption in Brussels? Because I think that we're the leaders. We are the role model, and France or Belgium or other countries should follow our example. Thank you. So maybe I will try to link it to what Mrs. Nebeska said, and she's been in practice in the field for over 25 years. So when you look at the way that you farm in your fields and land blocks, you've mentioned that in Hradec Králové, in Přestory, your farm is also partly in a protected zone. So what are your figures? What's your experience, and what do you do as a farming cooperative in Přestory? Well, I definitely agree with Mr. Voktal, because what the EU is blaming us for not doing, we actually do. And I will speak about our cooperative at this moment, not the others. I think it's a nonsense to continue reducing livestock production, because livestock production is a part of agriculture. It's an enclosed cycle, and if you don't keep that enclosed cycle, you cannot move forward, you cannot progress. Even if you do organic farming or any other activity in agriculture, you cannot do without livestock production, because we will have problems with water, retaining water and landscape, and all other related problems. When it comes to pesticides, as I said, we grow onions and broccoli, and we use the absolute minimum of pesticides. And what is really important for our activity, and what's also tragic, is that we're bound by certain limitations. We have to stick to the limits, but there's no suggested solution how we should do it. We can do everything. We tried out everything, and I've seen it in the 25, 26 years. But still, what is coming on us are restrictions, and it's restrictions and restrictions again. And it's only farming that is blamed, and everybody's pointing fingers at farmers in the Czech Republic and in Europe. And I think it's unfair. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Nebeska. Mr. Baskus listening, so maybe I have a question for you.
The Czech Republic is ambitious enough in its environmental goals and defined by the Common Agriculture Policy for the years 23 till 27.
I'm not sure to have fully understood the question. You're asking whether the Czech Republic is ambitious enough in its draft national strategy plan. Okay. As regards environment and climate. Okay. No, clearly, I think, and this is what has been mentioned in the letter of observation that the Commission issued and sent, I think, to the public authorities of Czechia. But we believe that, I think, the ambition with regard, I think, to environment and climate is not sufficient as far as environment and climate ambition on three aspects. The first one is that I think we believe that in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emission and all the action related to climate mitigation, in our view, are not sufficient. And here I would like to react, I think, on the previous discussion. We are not asking, I think, to stop livestock production. What we believe is that I think we can adapt the livestock production systems in order to make them, less emitting of greenhouse gas and, having a lower environmental impact. The second thing that the second element that we are, raising is that I think we believe that in terms of biodiversity protection and development, not enough, I think, is done, and in particular, there's not enough coherence with the prioritized, action framework, which has been designed, I think, for this Natura 2000 area. So this is for us, I think, quite important, and we do believe that agriculture, like other sectors, need to enhance, I think, its contribution. And I would say the last, I think the third part, I think, of our request, I think, for Czechia, I think, to revise upwards, I think, his level of ambition for environment and climate is in terms of, the design and the definition of the different types of intervention that would help farmers to improve, I think, their environmental and climate performance. And here we talk about the already the definition of conditionality, and we have some particular worries regarding the definition of crop rotation, the requirement for crop rotation, and the requirement related to the management of soil, which is quite fundamental. And I'm sure Mr. Miko, will not contradict me. But also, I think, regarding the eco scheme. The eco scheme are meant to be a very powerful tool, I think, to improve, I think, and promote, I think, this transition towards sustainability. And we believe that, I think, the level of ambition of this eco scheme is not sufficient. So we would like, and this is what we are currently discussing with the Czech public authorities, we would like, I think, the Czech public authorities to revise upwards, I think, I think the level of ambition with regard, I think, to this eco scheme. But if you allow me, I think, a last word, I think, concerning the first part of the discussion we have, whether the CAP and the strategic plan will be able to reach all these environmental targets. I've heard very attentively, Mr. Lavasek. I would like to say that I think for us, what is extremely important is three things. The first one is that we have entered into this process, which is progressive, but which is irreversible, and which is shared by the vast majority of stakeholders, and this is extremely important. The second element is that we need also to engage and lead and promote a change of mindset. And there I would like to insist, it's not only a change of mindset, I think, for farmers, it's a change of mindset along, I think, the whole food supply chain, the food industry, the food retail sector, and I think the behavior of food consumers. I think they need also to change, I think, the way they consume. And the last element is that the CAP will not do it itself, and I think the CAP will do it in a coordinated and coherent manner with other initiatives concerning the whole food supply chain. And we talk a lot about the protection of biodiversity, but I think there's all the initiatives related to climate, to the development of a circular economy, to the organic farming plan, etc., etc. We could talk at length, and this is the whole, I would say this is all these different policy initiatives and legal initiatives sometimes, which will be important to really, I would say, convert and ensure, I think, the transition of agriculture within the whole food supply chain, and we are confident that we will go there. Whether we achieve exactly the environmental target by 2030, at the end of the day, is not that important. What is important is that I think we are in a journey, and I think that we will not, I think, turn back, I think, from this journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I saw that Mr. Hlaváček made some notes, or he wants to say something, like reaction for Mr. Basco?
Yes, thank you. I feel you are hesitant to pass me the floor because you are afraid I won't give it back, but I will be short now. No, I just wanted to react in a similar way to what Basco mentioned. I think this is very sensitive discussion that I often hear, so it's also good to clarify. I don't hear from main institutions in Brussels anything in a direction of reducing animal production. I think these are more voices of activists that are mainly spread here in Brussels from time to time, fueled by some Commission representatives at the high level, but that is not anything that I think the main organizations and institutions here are considering. I think reasonable people understand that we need to have a balanced, sustainable production, and I underline the word production, because that is a source of organic matter that we need as nutrients for our soils. And second, limiting animal production in Europe would only lead to an increase of this production outside of Europe, which in combination with the population growth and also the fact that in Europe we are producing protein with the lowest environmental impact at the globe. So it would make zero sense, even for Europe, to reduce protein production animal production and then translate it into regions where this would be produced because of the global population growth, which with much worse environmental footprint. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hlaváček. Možná, že se teď obrátím na Alžbětu Procházkovou.
Now I'd like to turn the tables to Alžběta Hlaváčková. Unless there is a question. Oh, yes, we do have a question there in the auditorium. Go ahead, please. Hello, my name is Jaroslav Martinek. I'm from the Syngenta company. I'd like to step back a little bit and, with your permission, talk about the measures that will be implemented. It looks like that they will be pretty much mandatory for all the farmers. I'd like to ask the people in the auditorium here and the guests here, the distinguished guests, whether we need evolution or revolution in implementing these measures. So far, the idea behind it is that my perception is that farmers have their hands tied up, so to speak, by many measures that sometimes may be difficult to understand for them. So do our distinguished guests think that evolution should take place on the part of the farmers rather than the authorities? Okay, thanks for the question. I'd like to give the opportunity to take their shot at answering that question to the gentlemen who are connected virtually. So, Mr. Basco, what do you think? Evolution or revolution? Should we perhaps be more lenient and slower in introducing these measures? In other words, have the farmers had enough time to impose these measures, to implement these measures, so that they can actually make ends meet before 2023?
Thank you very much. In my view, it's neither evolution or revolution. What we need is to do a quantum leap. We don't need to revolutionize, I think, the place. A lot of effort, but we need to build on what has been done so far. A lot of efforts have been, undertaken by our farmers, which makes, the EU almost, I think, the region of the world which has improved the most, I think, it's environmental and climate performance, but I think we need to do more and we need to do much more. But in my view, I think we don't need to introduce a revolution. We need to accelerate the transition which is currently undertaken, but we can observe, I think, on the ground. And for this, we need to provide financial incentive. We need to provide advisory. We need to facilitate, the use of innovation. We know a lot now. I think we have access to a lot of new knowledge in terms of agronomics. We have access to a lot of new technologies and robotics, artificial intelligence, blockchain, etc., etc. So I think we can do much better. And it doesn't mean that we need to produce less. No, we need to produce more, but I think with less, but we need to produce better. So for this, I think we need to really accelerate, I think, the evolution that we see. And for that, in my view, the strategic plan is absolutely fundamental, because we need also to be able to better, and this is what I mentioned in my first intervention, we need to better tailor, I think, the financial support that can be granted, I think, to the farmers through the CAP, to the real need of farmers. Because each farmer needs a specific solution across, I think, depending on the sector in which it operates, depending on the production system that is undertaking, conventional agriculture, organic farming, agroecology, agroforestry, etc. Each farmer is unique, is specific, and we need to have a CAP which is really at the service, I think, of the farmer to do, I think, this transition. So I would say an accelerated evolution, this is what we need in order to make it by 2030, because we have no time to waste. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Já myslím, že to tady zaznělo už několikrát. Specifika.
Thank you very much. I think it's been mentioned a couple of times. The specifics on the individual regions need to be taken into account. So once again, evolution or revolution, this time the question to Martin Hlaváček, will be clean cut or a rather individual slow development?
We need an evolution on the practices that are closest to the farm, because here we need adaptation and learning process. And we have done a lot well in the past, yeah? Farmers have, and they are very adaptive. We see it with all the reforms we have done over the past years. They will do it if they understand it, if it is manageable, and if they can master the practice. So here we need further evolution. That relates to GAEX, that relates to eco schemes that were mentioned now, that relates to continuous investments under second pillar. While I think there are areas where we need, and we already have needed long time ago, a revolution, and it is not coming. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning. This is to make available qualitative changes to some elements and equations of the agri-food production and even non-food production. Why we are not having revolution on new genomic techniques? If we are talking about reduction of fertilizers and pesticides, why we are not having revolution? We need revolution on approvals of new active substances and authorizations of alternatives to those we are banning. This is what Monica was also talking about. We need much more aligned to Green Deal and Farm to Fork, the novel food regulation. We are preaching about SMEs, we are preaching about needs for alternative proteins, but we cannot place on the market, or those who pass the process, they have oligopoly or monopoly for 5 years before others can enter the market. So we are saying we are speeding up to catch 2030, but at the same time, we are having in legislation elements that are blocking the market for 5 years because they are protected under the data protection. So these are all elements where we have needed, and we desperately need revolution. And this is why I said at the beginning, if we still change this, and we can quickly, because some are quick fixes, we can meet the targets 2030. If we won't find this solution, then we do just evolution, and likely we won't meet the targets.
Thank you very much. Trošku navážu na Martina Hlaváčka, který několikrát zmiňoval.
So I will elaborate on Mr. Hlaváček because he repeatedly have said that we don't have much time. So that applies also to our discussion. So just a quick response, Mrs. Nebeska. You as a farmer, as a manager in farming, should we have a revolution or evolution? I think that the answer is clear, but still, what do you think? Well, if we do a revolution, I think that we're chopping down a tree that we're sitting on, because when the EU keeps calling for bigger independence on oil and gas and imported fertilizers and so forth. So in the times when we are trying to strengthen our self-sufficiency, we're also playing a dangerous game. So we're calling for a simplified system. We farmers call for a simplified, fair, and realistic system. So that is clear, I believe, as an answer. Okay, thank you. I think that Alžběta Procházková will have a different perspective to share with us. Well, let me tell you, when it comes to environment protection, we can say that in some respects, it would be great to make a revolution, but at the same time, we are very aware that that solution is not possible in the current situation. So we're searching for solutions that would somehow support what needs to be done in the landscape. But at the same time, we have to cooperate with the farmers, with the farming sector, because again, there's no other option. We have to do it that way. So in that way, I'd like to say that, in my opinion, in the Czech Republic in particular, we have a problem because the cooperation is not sufficient. And I think that also other people from NGOs will agree with me that farmers see us as opponents, as somebody doing things that go against what farmers want to do. And they don't believe that we are searching for joint solutions and that we want to do things for the good and in the interest of the landscape. So I'd like to call on a bigger cooperation, especially when we're at this university at this moment. So when we were preparing the strategic plan in the Czech Republic, I believe that we should have focused more on the drafting process, because it's good for the upcoming years and for our strategies. I believe that our agriculture must go through a huge transformation, and the whole society must accept its ownership of that process. And I think we should do much more when it comes to communication with general public about this. All activities, all campaigns targeted at public at large must be supported with impact studies. We don't have these impact studies, not only on the national level, but also on the European level. In the Czech Republic, we're also lacking bigger cooperation amongst ministries. We believe that the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture should cooperate much more when preparing such strategies. And there should be also other ministries involved, because there's common interest. We have many best practice examples in the Czech Republic, but the transformation of the agriculture calls for systemic solutions, and the systemic solution must also include a good system of consultancy, and we don't have that. We should be searching for optimal agro-environmental solutions and plans, and we don't have them in the Czech Republic. All measures implemented must be monitored on an ongoing basis and reviewed, so that it doesn't happen in the end that the strategic plan is inefficient, because we talked about inefficiencies many times today. And when it comes to the preparation or drafting of strategic plans, I think that neighboring countries should cooperate a lot. We can find inspiration, or rather negative inspiration, negative experience with preparing some past strategies where cooperation lagged, and it's still lacking today. Okay, that's what Alžběta Procházková says as a representative of WWF. Looking at my watch, I think that we should finish, but if we have one last question, we would give you the floor. So can we give the floor to the lady for the last question? Quick question. So the lady in red in the center. Well, these are areas where the people working in the field, in agriculture and farming, somehow clash with those in environment protection. But it's all about time, and time is running out, as Mr. Hlaváček said. So my name is Jitka Gecová. I'm the head of Food Safety Department of the Ministry of Agriculture. And of course, I'm also responsible for the area of crop protection chemicals. And I have a question to Mr. Basko, and I'll elaborate on what Mr. Hlaváček said. I would like to know whether we, as the state institution, and whether the European institutions are capable of offering a solution to farmers, a solution that will allow them to produce foodstuffs in a safe way. And they would also be supported by legislation rather than being hampered by legislation. Because just like Martin said, we want farmers to work more environment friendly, more sustainably, but we don't offer any legislative solutions to them when it comes to alternative substances in the protection of crop. And by using these alternatives, they would contribute to protecting biodiversity. And I don't think we're the only member state having that problem. By constraining the usage of effective substances, the farmers cannot grow minority produce, be it fruit or vegetables, things that do not require such a huge piece of land to be grown. So if we want to have sufficient biodiversity, we have to give farmers a way, a solution to do it safely. Okay, gentlemen, very shortly, please. So I think we've heard it a number of times already. We see only legislative barriers, not supports. Mr. Bascu, what's your answer?
Thank you very much. I will try to be brief. Basically, to recall that what we want to do is to reduce significantly, I think, the dependency, I think, of farmers on the use of chemical plant protection products. And for this, I think there are different pathways. We can promote and support, I think, farmers to optimize, I think, their production system, and there, they can use, precision agriculture. They can use different types of farming system in order to reduce the use, I think, of this product while, still protecting, I think, the crops. There are also alternative ways like integrated pest management, like, alternative production system, organic farming, agroecology, etc. And there's also the pathway, with, using, more, I would say, the result of new research, and in particular, I think the potential of biotechnology. And Mr. Lavasek mentioned, I think, the new genomic techniques and the extent to which we could, I think, promote, I think, the use, I think, in the EU. This is something on which I think the Commission is working quite intensively. I think over the last few years, there was a study being published last year. We are in the process of preparing an impact assessment in view of making a proposal, I think, in my view, I think, in the course of next year. So we are also progressing there. But it is clear that I think, there are different, ways, I think, for farmers, I think, to address, I think, the pest and the risk, and to ensure, I think, the resilience, I think, of the crop. So it is clear that what we want, I think, is to engage, I think, this process with these different, I would say, pathways being run, I think, in parallel. So we're not going to ask, and this is one of the environmental targets, we're not going to ask farmers to reduce the use and the risk, I think, of plant protection product by 50%, I think, already tomorrow. It is over, the medium term. And in parallel to that, we are going to facilitate, provided this is safe for the environment and for human health, we're going to facilitate, I think, the use of biotechnology and make it, and make, I think, the legal framework, more supportive. So for me, I think this is a gradual and progressive process over the medium term, but there are ways, I think, to I would say, support farmers, I think, for alternative production system, use of new technologies, or optimizing, I think, the current production system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to your view, Mr. Hlaváček?
Yeah, thank you. I would just add one element that was mentioned here several times, but nobody was able to elaborate, and this is our big problem. We are forgetting one big element in the equation, and this is really the trade and retail. And it was mentioned at the beginning, this is farm to fork strategy. So it covers the entire chain. But if you look inside, and let's be self-critical, all the burden is, or 98% of the burden is just put on farmers. Where are the traders? Where is the retail? And this is another deficit that we have in acceleration in the right direction. This is what my colleagues were talking about. This is about the value. How do you want that people at least understand, and eventually and hopefully, if they have purchasing power, distinguish and pay for the way we have produced food in a more or less sustainable way? Of course, we can invent multiple elements of labeling, but it's not about labeling. It is also about how this is marketed and about the obligation of the stakeholders in the value chain. And this is what I've been criticizing for long, but we are unfortunately not moving that much forward. We have nice words that we need to put them in, and they would be big accelerator of this change. Trust me. They would be big accelerator. Imagine what the market chains have already marketed to us. Things that we would have never imagined we would consume. No? Are very efficient in this, with all the marketing and business power behind, and also the direct relationship to consumers. And I don't see them motivated enough in this direction that we are trying to achieve when it comes to Green Deal and Farm to Fork objectives.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Hlaváček. Thank to all the panelists for participating in this discussion. Thank you for interesting questions and comments. And thank you all for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, our guests were Mr. Pierre Bascu, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Monika Nebeska, thank you for being here. Mrs. Alžběta Procházková. And Martin Hlaváček, thank you very much. So, there is a coffee break ahead of us. It will end at around 12:10, maybe 12:15. So I think you have 15 minutes for a short break. And then the next part of today's discussion and today's conference will begin. The next block will have a topic: integrating climate mitigation and biodiversity regeneration in food system transformation. So I will wait for you here in 15 minutes. So enjoy your coffee and be back in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.